I'm going to go ahead and share screen. If I could get some verbal yeses or nos, if people can see the screen okay.
Definitely can see.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming out this afternoon on a lovely Sunday day to come over to meet Rebecca and Nick in their home. This is our, I believe, 6th or 7th open house. So we're very excited to have you all here. And they will be showcasing their ground source heat pump with Steve from Lake Country Geothermal. So just do a little bit introduction about the HeatSmart program. We are a community-based heat pump campaign, also connecting folks to weatherization programs and incentives as well. Currently, we cover a couple counties, Schuyler, where Nick and Becca are from, as well as our neighbors, Seneca, Steuben, and Yates. And we're really here to empower folks. We want to help folks be able to learn more about heat pumps, the benefits, the incentives, so they can adopt them into their homes to get some clean heating and cooling options and get that weatherization work done if that's of interest. So we really want to help folks do a lot of decreasing and increasing at the same time. So we want to help folks decrease their heating and cooling costs and also decrease fossil fuel usage, but at the same time increase knowledge about heat pumps and increase comfort, health, and safety. So those are some of our main goals. We are about one of 20 HeatSmart campaigns across New York State, and we are grant funded through NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which helps with our electrification and other energy goals across New York State. And our physical organization or program is based at Cornell Cooperative Extension, particularly in Schuyler, but again, we cover many counties. So we work with a lot of folks. We work with folks like homeowners, such as a lot of you on the screen today. We also do programming with renters and landlords, small business and nonprofits. And there's always new things popping up. So we're always excited to get the word out about all those options. The average home energy use is about 75% when it comes to a typical home in New York State. And that's for heating and cooling. And guess if it's more for heating and cooling? What do we think?
Heating.
Yes, of course. So our average New York household, now mind you, this was pre the last couple several months having kind of odd bills coming up, but roughly a New York State homeowner is going to be paying about $2,500 a year in energy bills. We'll find out a bit more about how much Becca and Nick were paying a little later today.
More like $5,000.
Yeah, it's definitely that average has probably gone up a bit. I mean, we have some folks on kerosene, natural gas, wood, so there is a bit of differences there. But the idea is by adopting heat pumps for clean heating, cooling, weatherization, you could save hundreds to thousands of dollars pending what you're currently heating with and what's going on with your situation. So where are we with the climate change? I should actually change this to climate crisis. It's kind of where we're at. We are really trying to decrease that right now. So 30% of our greenhouse gases, or GHGs, are from homes, places we work, worship, shop, and hang out with folks. And by adopting these heat pumps and other things to get the home tighter, we can make things cozier, cut down costs, and help the planet out as well. So a big thing that New York State is looking at is the New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protections Act. So there's different benchmarks, decreasing these greenhouse gases by 40% by 2030, and then increasing that amount to 85% by 2050 in total. So we are definitely well on our way, and hopefully this story with Becca, Nick, and Steve from Lake Country Geothermal will inspire you. So I am going to head, and I'm going to be quiet and go ahead and let Nick and Becca and Barney, if he's on screen, that's their dog, introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their home and so forth.
Hi, Barney's looking out the window somewhere, but we moved into our house in August of 2020. We live on the east side of Schuyler County in Trumansburg. It's an older farmhouse, probably built in the 1850s, and it's like one of those, it's a classic farmhouse, so you can, like there's an addition and then another addition and then another addition throughout time. And so it made our house kind of complicated in the way that it was being heated previously. And we are very fortunate that we have a lot of land. We have 20 acres. So it was a no-brainer that when we were ultimately deciding to do geothermal, that we were going to go with a horizontal system because we have enough land to do it. And yeah, we also have a lot of barns. We have, like, depending on how you split it, like 3 barns.
4, 5.
4 or 5, I don't know. We have many outbuildings, yeah. And yes, we're getting married in a month.
Congrats.
Thank you. So after the first winter that we lived in the house, I was kind of sitting around, first of all, thinking, well, our furnace is from 1995, and our hot water heater, which was also fuel oil based, was around the same time. And I was thinking, well, while the older systems tend to last longer, probably were due to die soon, and I didn't really want to be cut with my pants down in the middle of a January, and was thinking about us getting a new furnace. And so I was thinking it'd be a no-brainer to stop using fuel oil, especially with the cost. I had crunched the numbers, and it was around $3,000, which Erica has data on later in the slides, just to heat for that one winter, the oil costs. So we were thinking, well, maybe we could switch to propane. A lot of people out here in the country use propane. Obviously it would be an entirely new system for us. We kind of had an idea of where we would want to put the tank. I don't like the idea of it being like in the middle of a yard, though. No problem with other people doing that, just not really where I wanted it. So the cost is linear, so the cost increases the further away you put it from your house, and then it's like the issue of like, would the delivery truck be able to reach it? And then the cost didn't really seem that scary to do that when compared with when I was looking at the numbers for geothermal. The cost wasn't that much of a difference once you factored in the tax credit, and then again, obviously the fact that you become pretty independent on your fuel costs out. It was for us around like 8 to 10 years. And obviously, again, just kind of how long they last was pretty great, because we plan to be in our house for a long time. We're young, and we really like the land that we live on, and we can foresee, building family members' homes on our land and just being here for a long time. And it made sense to choose a heating system that lasted a long time. If I'm talking too much, Erica, you cut me off.
No, you're doing perfect. Don't worry, you're good. Just let me know when you want me to switch screens. I don't want to cut you guys off. You're doing
Great.
good.
So this picture here is our old fuel oil tank that was in our basement,
Still there.
which is still there. Yeah. And our furnace was down there. But interestingly enough, the previous owners who had lived here for 60 years, they were in their mid 80s. And maybe weren't extremely up to date on the various heating options that came around at the turn of the century. And the upstairs was kind of cool once they took out a wood burning stove. And then there's pictures of this later in the slides, but there was a second fuel oil furnace that was also upstairs just to heat a portion of our house. And it was like a mobile home furnace. And there will be pictures of that too. So that's kind of the unique thing about our house, that we were heating our house with two different oil furnaces. So getting into the specifics of what we had installed, Steve is probably a little bit better at it. I'm just, he was very knowledgeable in making, the selection. But we had a horizontal loop field dug. And then the furnace that you can see down in the basement is it's standing upright, and there's also an option for one that lays horizontally, but it's like kind of on stilts. And that was kind of like the major decision once we decided that we wanted a variable system. I'm going to let Steve talk about that, because I'm going to definitely botch it. But we got the variable heating system mostly because of our plans in the future that we would want to upgrade our ductwork, because we only have ductwork in about half of our house. Some ductwork goes to their second story, but in the future we'd like to add more ductwork. And so the variable system has the ability to continue to heat based on how much space that you're heating, whereas there's basically one that just kind of turns on, turns off. And again, I should let Steve talk about that.
You're doing great, Becca.
Steve, what is in this basement? I know we're going to talk about it when we actually get to sneak down in the basement with Rebecca and Nick in a little bit, but can you point out some of the parts on here and explain them a little bit?
Sure. Well, to begin with, Becca mentioned that, and I don't think you can see my pointer, but if you look at the image on the right-hand side, that the unit was vertical instead of horizontal. Most manufacturers of forced air heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, make them in both orientations, vertical or horizontal. And in Beck and Nick's case, it was really touch and go whether we could stick a vertical underneath their ductwork. As you can see, there's no clearance there. And vertical is a cheaper option.
Right, and so as you can kind of see how low the clearance is in our basement, which you'll probably be able to get a better visual of when we go down there. It's probably 6 feet, and the measurements that Steve and his workers took had to be pretty precise to make sure it all fit in there. And then, as I mentioned, our hot water heater was also on fuel oil, and again, of similar age, like from the mid 90s. And we had planned from the beginning to switch that to an electric hot water heater with use of the de-superheater. And the de-superheater kind of takes some energy that the geothermal system had produced and uses that to heat some of the water, so you're not 100% using electric all the time. There are like certain times of year where you're more likely for the de-superheater to be heating your water, right, Steve?
You could be a salesperson, Becca. That was excellent. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Whenever these forced air geothermal heat pumps are on for either heating or air conditioning, they have an option to redirect some of that heat that they're bringing in to the potable hot water system. And in the wintertime, when the system is running quite a bit, the geothermal system will essentially be providing 100% of the potable hot water demand. In the shoulder season, spring and fall, and even in air conditioning, maybe 50% of the potable hot water. So you still need a primary hot water heater, but the geothermal system will handle a bunch of it depending on the time of the year and the use of the heat pump. And
so the other picture that you can see on the screen is in the middle of the installation process. They had kind of, there's kind of two teams who came to our house to work on the installation. It was like the outside guys and the inside guys. The outside guys dug all the trenches, laid all of the pipes and things in the big horizontal field, which is kind of like 200 feet by 400 feet, which there will be pictures of soon. And then those eventually have like an in and out, which you can see coming in through the foundation in that picture that's kind of in the middle of the screen. And that was kind of like where the outside guys stopped. And then the inside guys kind of take over from there and then kind of connect where that enters the house to all of the machinery that you see in the picture on the right.
Awesome. And again, this for those of you who might have just tuned in, this installation at Rebecca and Nick's, this a retrofitted ducted ground source heat pump system. Sorry, Steve, I know I probably said that wrong. Is the system that was put in by Lake Country Geothermal. So let's continue and see what else was going on with the decisions.
So I think that's kind of it about this slide. Yeah. So the other pictures here, I'll speak to the pictures first, because I was just talking about how it's kind of funny how the house was heated in a piecemeal kind of fashion. That's our mud room, and that's the second old fuel oil furnace, which is now disconnected, thankfully. So they were able to extend some ductwork for us, which was a very kind offer, because our house, again, because it being an old farmhouse, we have that basement, as you see from the previous, but so there's some additions to our house that have a crawl space that I've been in personally, which is not the roomiest. And then there's an additional crawl space that's even further away from the main part of the house. That's like, when you're inside of it, it's like a very large coffin. That's how little headroom there is. And so, it was actually really just convenient that the folks from Lake Country were able to do the ductwork, because I would have had to call around to probably 10 different companies to figure out a person whose body could physically just fit in our crawl space to do that ductwork, and people who were willing enough. So, since then, previously, it was forced air that we already had, but we also have some baseboard electric upstairs and also some really old like 1950s electric like wall units that we don't really turn on super often because we're just not upstairs super a lot because our bedroom is on the first floor. But this behemoth that you see there is a mobile home furnace that the previous owners put in just to heat the mudroom and the kitchen, which they probably would have been better off 5 years ago just putting a mini split in, but they did this. And it would crank on blast at like full heat. Our dog would love it because he would just sit in front of it and cook. Excuse me, then the heater would turn off. And so our kitchen was kind of heated like off and on, off and on. Same thing with the rest of our house with the other furnace, but it was 2 different furnaces with 2 different thermostats, which was annoying. And then this just kind of took up a lot of space in a valuable area of our house. I'll let Nick talk, I guess, a little bit about what we've said about about how the house has felt since we've started using our geosystem.
Oh no.
If I could interrupt just for a second, Carl, are you on board finally?
Yes, I am.
Yay!
Sorry, it took about 4 attempts before you could finally make it in.
Welcome, Carl. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, as Becca mentioned, the heating system before our fuel oil furnace was very loud, very mechanical, lots of loud clanking noises. And then it would turn on and blast the really hot air for a few minutes, then turn off. And so it'd be on and off again, on and off again. Whereas now with the geothermal setup, it's almost on all the time. And the air that it's blowing is much cooler. And so it kind of works more like a slow cooker, like low and slow, but yeah, very even heat, no complaints whatsoever. Everyone, that's the first question everyone asks us is like, how was the winter? Did you guys need to supplement any other heat? No, it heated us completely fine. We really noticed no differences comfort wise, and we've only had to turn the AC on a few times, but it's been great. I turned it on just now for the demo, but we didn't need it on.
Yeah, and you can't even hear it running. So some interesting caveats, again, the old house thing. When the Lake Country folks were changing out the old furnace and hooking up ductwork to the new system, their goal was to take out some of the old ductwork and upsize it a little bit to help with the sound of the flow. I mean, kind of, basic physics is basically there's going to be more airflow because it's a more powerful system, and the smaller ducts are going to be louder. So they upsized the diameter. And what that photo you're seeing in the middle of the screen is, they had to kind of stop in the middle because we had this old duct that was under our dining room, which is actually like 5 feet over here from us, which was encased in asbestos. It was only 5 feet of it, but the Lake Country folks obviously wouldn't want to be exposed to that work hazard. So they paused for a little while until we could get that removed. And then they came back in and finished upsizing the ducts that made sense for them to upsize. And then after that, they extended the ductwork, like I mentioned, added a new duct to our kitchen, as well as a return vent to our kitchen. So Nick mentioned that we haven't really noticed any difference as far as the quality of heat, but on the opposite end of that, we've definitely noticed a huge improvement in the quality of the heat of our kitchen, because now it's synced up with the rest of our house and warmer than it was before. Mostly because of ductwork, I guess, but also because they needed to do that with the old system, because that old furnace just wasn't powerful enough to reach that part of our house. And now we have a more powerful system. That other caveat that we mentioned about the height of our basement being able to fit the vertical furnace, obviously a big point of consideration was the fact that the vertical furnace is cheaper than the horizontal one. So I'm sorry, I keep talking about vertical and horizontal, but the vertical and horizontal loop field is the outside, but I'm talking about the physical furnace in the basement. Sorry about that. And you can see there's a little yellow circle on the screen that when they were doing the walkthrough after the installation was finished, I had asked, like, I had been a little bit anxious because, excuse me, do you want to talk about that? I'm having a problem with my throat.
Yeah, well, they had just installed this system after the incredibly wet year we had last year. And so we were cognizant of how wet it can get in our basement. And we asked them, like, okay, well, how high can the water get before it's bad news for us? And so that's what that yellow circle is depicting. That's the point of no return for our furnace. And yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. We've since installed a much more heavy duty dehumidifier downstairs. We got a new sump pump, and we're looking at other sorts of drainage systems, but hasn't been a problem this summer, of course. But yeah, that was a point of concern for us.
So really, it was just kind of first-time home buyer issue of we just haven't been in the house that long, and we just didn't really know how wet our basement got, and weren't exactly cognizant of maybe that would have been a benefit to just not, if you have a wet basement, it might be worth the extra however many dollars, to the order of probably a few thousand, to get that furnace that lays horizontally, because the mechanism that would be dangerous for it to get wet is, to my knowledge, a few feet off the ground. Whereas this, it's like the danger zone is about 4 inches, which when all the snow melted, we came really close to literally like 2 weeks after it was done being installing. So we were a little bit anxious about that for a while, but we've sprung into action. The timeline of what happened was Steve came over to our house sometime like towards the end of the summer. I want to say like September or August. And I think we signed a contract like around September or October. At the time of that, signing the contract, it was, they were very forthcoming with the fact that it's kind of you're very much at the beck and call of the weather of upstate New York. And so that, they can only dig until, on certain days and to certain time periods. And it was kind of an ever changing timeline of like, this is the day we'll start. Okay, maybe it might be this, maybe it might be this. The dates of, it was the end of December when they started digging outside. And then that was kind of, I think, to my knowledge, we were probably the last people you guys dug that winter, because after that, like shortly after that, the ground was frozen. And then once the outside stuff is done, it's like you can kind of take your time as far as starting up on the inside stuff, as far as getting the old furnace out and the new one in. But they kind of sprung into action very quickly, because another unforeseen issue that we had was that our air pump for our well corroded out the bottom and was overflowing while we were out of town, and actually thankfully while Lake Country was in our house doing the installation. So they noticed, and we had friends come over and like fix it up. And what happened was our old hot water heater, which we were planning on replacing anyway, was like bursting at its seams of water, filling our basement with water also then. And we were very fortunate that like within a couple of days of that happening, they came out and installed our new hot water heater. And then a few days after that started doing everything else with the furnace. So it was actually very convenient timing. As far as this picture here, you can see that there's a big excavator that was digging the trench for the horizontal loop field outside. And you can see the ground's a little bit torn up closer between that old outhouse and where the photo is being taken, because they had used a excavator to dig some lines closer to the house, because our septic line is near there. I remember being a little bit anxious about that, and Steve was really funny. He was like, listen, we've torn up people's septic lines and dozens of times, and we'll do it again, and we just fix it and we just move on. It's like no big deal to them. And I don't think they had to,
they didn't.
But they did it. Yeah, we were good.
And they had to thread quite a needle between our septic and our well pump, or
our well line. Yeah.
Did we break your septic line?
No.
If we did, no big deal.
And so the biggest thing with all of that, ground being overturned is that you have to kind of be comfortable with it looking a little bit sloppy for something like 6 to 8 months so that the lines can settle. Because if you bring heavy machinery to excavate and flatten it out, it could disturb the newly installed system. So we've just kind of been letting it go. And actually we're coming up on the time period in which we could get out there and flatten it, but we're having our wedding at our house in a month. And so we're just kind of letting it be because we got other stuff going on. As far as the
I can dive into this part.
Yeah, you go ahead.
That's easier.
All this
Sure. Yeah. And everyone, I apologize. I was so excited to showcase. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Erica Herman. I am the HeatSmart FLX South campaign director that helps provide support to folks connecting to these incentives and programs. But yeah, let's dive into it. So Rebecca and Nick's system, again, they had what was called a 5-ton GeoStar Sycamore system, a 060 model for those of you tech people. And again, as you could see from the last couple of pictures, it was a horizontal system. A little later, we'll talk a bit more about horizontal versus vertical for the outside portion, but the total cost initially was about $36,000. And the nice thing is that regardless of income, the major utility companies, for example, in our area, we have NYSEG has what's called the New York State Clean Heat Incentive Program. So that's based on, you get a certain amount of funds. I believe it's about $1,500 per every 10,000 BTUs. So basically for every 10,000 heating units, you get a certain amount. And then there's also a certain amount that they got for the desuperheater as well. So that rounded out to just a bit under $8,000. So $7,755, which brought them to a subtotal cost of about $20,000. So that was what they did. And again, it was beginning of the year in January when that work was, completed. So something that I know Rebecca and Nick are probably really looking forward to when it comes to tax season at the end of this year. But there's a lot of great tax credits on heat pumps, particularly ground source heat pumps right now. So there's a 26% federal tax credit. So once you take the NYSEG incentive away, that's 26% of that, about $20,000. So over $7,000 of incentives coming their way for that. And then most excitedly, we were doing a dry run previous Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, to get ready for this session. And then I was talking to Rebecca and Nick, I'm like, you guys know there's now a 25% state tax credit that just came out a couple months ago, right? And they're like, no. So that's up to $5,000 max. So they should be able to get that. So the subtotal cost with those incentives is just shy of $16,000. And as they were mentioning, we'll talk a bit more during the actual session where you get to look at the parts of their house in person through the camera. They actually did duct modifications for just under $2,000. So total on cost for them, we estimate it's going to be about $17,700. So that's about a 50% savings with all the incentives. So that actually makes it really competitive for folks who have the tax liability to get these tax credits. If you're thinking about air source heat pump, maybe a ground source heat pump could be a fit, and it could be about the same cost with a more efficient system. So I'm going to go ahead and Steve, do you have any other comments on this one? Or I think we covered most of it, but any comments on this slide?
Just a general comment that, of course, those prices have gone up significantly because of inflation.
Yeah.
So if you're going to walk away from this presentation thinking that you can get a system installed at 36,000 gross, that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, it'll be a little different. So something to keep in mind, just as like a buyer education, is when you have someone like Steve come over to do a site assessment for a heat pump system, when they give you a quote, and this is for most contractors, any house, this is just a good rule of thumb, just check like the expiration date at the bottom when it's coming to making a decision. And if you feel like you need more time, you can always reach out to Steve or whoever your heat pump contractor is and say like, hey, if we wait a little bit longer, what do you think prices might look like? So just something to keep in mind.
Just one additional comment. So when you approach a contractor, ask them for not only the cost of the installed system, but what they estimate you're going to save in terms of energy and in dollars.
And I think that's actually going to lead perfectly into either it's the next slide or the second to next slide. So perfect timing, Steve. Let me see if that's the next one. Perfect.
Unrehearsed.
Good timing. Unrehearsed. Rebecca and Nick, take it away. And then Steve, please add in.
So we had only been in our house for one full winter, but we had calculated that we spent $3,000 on fuel oil to heat our home and our hot water. Now, obviously, fuel oil costs continue to rise, and I don't really have perfect data, but I think the next slide has a little bit more information. But because we kind of had like half a winter on oil and then half a winter on geo, we still haven't been able to see our exact cost savings as far as what it costs with heating in the winter. But we have a pretty good estimate here, because you know, once you, with us having forced air, obviously the electric that it takes to force the heated air through the home, you know, that starts to go up. So you kind of have to balance the cost of the fact that you're saving on oil, but your electric bill will start to go up a little bit. If you have solar panels, I guess you don't have to worry about that as much, but we don't. And so we have, I mean, we still saved something like, yeah, there we go, $1,300 on heating our house last year when you balance the electric that went up a little bit. And also just in general, everything is costing more this year. And then this screenshot that you see here is one benefit of our system, the Sycamore system, is that it has some cool data collection, and it was showing us how much energy we were using. And then the other benefit is that Lake Country can remotely monitor how our system is running and make adjustments remotely, which I don't know much about, but Steve could probably speak to. And the other benefit of the Sycamore series is that if you're basically, again, with the communication thing, you can use an app on your phone. It's called Symphony. This is a screenshot of what it looks. You just open it up. It looks just like that. And really what you're looking at is, you know, is it on? What temperature is it running at? Do you have it heating or do you have it cooling? We've used it, like I've used it to like change the temperature, like when I've been at home, actually when I've been at work, but actually I use it more at home. Like if I'm just too lazy to get off the couch, I'll change the temperature on my phone.
I loved when you said that. You're like, yeah, I can just go like this. And then I look at my thermostat and it goes boop, boop, boop. And it just kind of adjusts.
So it's pretty user friendly. You know, we are millennials, I guess, but I mean, really, you can't mess this up on this app. There's nothing you can really do wrong.
Steve, do you have anything to add about the app on your end?
Yeah, a couple of comments. The system that enables the app for Becca and Nick also records performance data for the system every 10 seconds, about 60 parameters. So Joel out there, engineer, and this is all logged in the cloud, which I can see, my techs can see. And so we can monitor their system. It will automatically tell us when the system is maybe starting to operate outside of safe envelope and signal us. So these remote monitoring systems are extremely convenient and powerful, and reduce service costs, service calls in particular, significantly. Oftentimes, if there's something going wrong with the system, I'll know before Becca and Nick will. And I'll be sending them an email saying, hey, check this out, check this other thing out, and oftentimes avoids the service call. So the remote monitoring is starting to become ubiquitous so every heat pump system that you might consider installing, expect to have a remote monitoring system attached to it. And if it doesn't, ask why.
So the pictures that you're looking at, we'll be able to show you a closer look of when we go down into the basement. The primary reason why we thought Zoom would be a better idea is that our basement is a bit treacherous to get to, so safer for all parties if we show you over video. But basically, you know, there's not a ton of personal maintenance. It's still the maintenance of the installers coming, I think on an annual basis. I let Steve speak to that. But as far as, what we as homeowners have to worry about is changing the air filter, which you do on any forced air system. And the only other new thing to wrap your brain around is kind of have to check the water levels within the geothermal loop field system. You can see that from the house. It's like, and there needs to be enough solution basically going through the system, otherwise it won't work, is the extent of my knowledge.
Very good.
And we'll have Steve jump in a bit more on that when we can see it in person, which we'll see in just a bit. So I think that might be the last slide until, oh yeah, future. We'll go over the future really quick, and then we'll shut down my end and we'll hop in the basement.
That was just so that you could see, based on my body, how cramped it is in our basement and how it fits fine. As I mentioned, in the future, when we were thinking about what kind of system to install, we plan to, once we have kids someday and there will be other people living in our house upstairs that we just don't occupy now, we'll want it to be more comfortable continuously, and we'll add ductwork. And we would like to improve our house's ability to keep heat in. Like, we have, I would say about half of our windows are probably original, and a bit leaky, and increasing insulation like in our attic. And hopefully that'll in general make our system more efficient, but we already have a more efficient system than when we moved in. So we feel pretty accomplished.
I'm going to stop share screening, and I will let Becca and Nick go ahead and share, and we'll hop in the basement and check things out. And I think, Steve, once we get in there, pending what we're looking at, if you want to jump in minutely what some differences might be if someone has like a water-based system, what some parts might be a little different.
Do you want me to do that now while Becca and Nick are migrating to the basement?
Sure.
So there are generally two types of geothermal heat pumps. One provides heat directly to forced air, and all it can do is replace a furnace. The other applies its heat directly to water in a so-called hydronic system, and it can do a myriad of things, including provide heat to baseboard, radiant flooring, hydronic air handlers, whatever you can imagine, frankly. So
there's Barney looking down.
What's that?
There's Barney the dog looking down. He doesn't like the basement.
Yeah, okay. So Becca and Nick's system is obviously a forced air system, but if you had baseboard or radiant flooring or a combination, you can still do a geothermal system, different type of heat pump, same type of loop, but it can provide the heating for those systems. There is a caveat though, because typically in a baseboard system, the boiler is providing 180-degree water to the baseboard. Heat pumps can do comfortably 130, maybe 140 degrees. So there may be some accommodations you need to make to the distribution system, but it's still very doable.
Perfect. All right, looks like we're in the basement. Let's rock and roll in there.
A totally seamless transition. So yeah, our basement's kind of hard to get into through this way. When they did the installation of the furnace, they actually used our Bilco doors, which I'll show you. But down here, when you come into our basement, there's our electric box. We have some of our ductwork that was here when we moved in. You can see where, how Nick is standing, how Nick's like 5'9", so it's pretty tight in here. And that is the furnace itself, and then all of this shiny stuff here is our new ductwork, and you can see where that kind of extends into the crawl space that goes under our dining room, which was where that photo was, where the old duct needed to be removed that had the asbestos around it. One key thing actually that was a big change to our basement, other than all of this equipment, was that when they installed the new ductwork, they popped a vent into this duct to kind of provide heat to the basement itself when it's heating, which is nice because it actually, we found, kept our dining room a lot warmer because we feel our dining room's not the most well insulated. So this is, you got to kind of duck through there. But that's the furnace, which then there's this looks like two hot water tanks, but really that one is the electric hot water heater, and that one is the de-superheater. And then this is the flow system, which I should show you where it enters the house. The photo that we showed you earlier of where it enters the house through our foundation is there, and then it travels upwards through this kind of wall here and then down, and then you can kind of see where it goes along the wall, excuse me, along the floor there. I'll let Nick open that up so you guys can see. It's kind of, it might be kind of hard to see on video, but you can kind of, yeah, you can see the little pool floating in there, and it looks like it's a good level, right, Steve?
It's perfect.
Yeah, and then what you saw over here is that we still have our old fuel oil tank that we haven't taken out of here yet, just mostly out of our sheer laziness.
Well, 3 people have told me to make it into a smoker, so.
Carl Faber might be one of those people. Yeah, and then what we talked about before with the danger zone for the level of how much water for reference. I'll kind of zoom out a little bit, and Nick, do you mind pointing to that with your? So that's kind of about how much water can be down here before that system would be toast, which I'm definitely not anxious about at all.
What's that little white thing, Rebecca? That's kind of blinking.
That Steve, is that how the sycamore talks to you?
Oh, that's Symphony.
Yes.
So that's the remote monitoring device. It communicates with your local Wi-Fi and logs data, enables the app on your smartphone so you can control the thermostat.
And yeah, the other biggest difference down here is these ducts, like we mentioned, were upsized, and we still have some of our, like, you can shine the light over that way, Nick. Like, some of the ducts that were here before are still the same diameter as they were, and I think Steve had mentioned that, like, if someday we wanted to upsize those, I think it might make the system when it's blowing a little bit quieter, but we don't really find the noise particularly bothersome, other than it's just sometimes like a white noise throughout the house that mostly just out of sheer laziness. If Nick's on one side of the house and I'm on the other, he can't really hear me shouting across the house to get this done.
Just a general comment on airflow and noise. Because these systems produce heat at a lower temperature, even in the forced air version. So with a heat pump, it's maybe 100 degrees. With a furnace, you might be getting air coming out of the furnace at 130 to 150 degrees. To get the same amount of heat to the space in the house, you're obviously going to have to put more volume of air to that space at 100 degrees than you would 130 degrees. And as a result, you're going to get higher velocities of air going through the ductwork. And at some point, you can get enough velocity going through the ductwork to cause it to start to vibrate. So this is one of the things that we check when we do a site assessment, is the ductwork size, to try to determine whether the ductwork needs to be modified or not. As it turned out for Becca and Nick, there seems to be at least one duct run that has got an excessive or a very high velocity of air going through it, causing some noise, which we're going to get to and adjust. But it's not always the case. In fact, it's rarely the case that we have to modify ductwork when we retrofit a system from a fossil fuel furnace to a geothermal heat pump.
Yeah. And you said it was a pretty big system. How did they get that in, Becca and Nick?
Through the store. That's our Bilco doors to our basement, and it was actually pretty impressive to see them get it down the stairs with the dolly. Here, I can actually probably show you better from upstairs. Before I go upstairs, is there anything else I should highlight while we're down here?
Oh, you said they added a new vent downstairs, right?
Yeah, this one.
Very cool.
Here, I'll zoom out a little bit.
Nice. And what did they do? Did you need an electric panel upgrade? I know sometimes people need more amps. What was the situation in your home?
No, they ended up being able to just kind of rewire everything, take out some, there were, as I had previously mentioned, some electric heaters that we hadn't even been using, but just the previous owners never took out. So the Lake Country guys were really great at just kind of prioritizing, taking out different ports of that box, and never needed an upgrade to the box, which was good.
Saved a couple $1,000. That's awesome. Good job, Steve. And then you mentioned earlier that there's a filter. Is that easy to get to? Is that something that Lake Country has to come over to do?
So we can do that ourselves. It's kind of just like our old furnace. Nick's kind of just popping off a cover there. And that's how you get to the filter. We've already changed it once based on the timeline that Steve recommended. It's too early to change now, but it looks pretty clean still. When did we change it? Just like 3 months ago? Mm-hmm. I think after, Steve can correct me. I think there was a slide on this. I think you're supposed to change it like in the first 3 months, like after 3 months, because there's a lot of dust that kind of got tossed around with the with the changing of the ductwork, and then every 6 months for the first year, and then after that just annually. Correct me, Steve?
Yeah, we generally recommend to start out changing filters every 6 months, and then based on how dirty or clean it is, adjust the frequency accordingly. It's very much dependent on how dusty the house is and how dusty the air is that's going through the system.
That's awesome. And then Steve, if this was a water-based system, the only other thing you'd have is something that looks like a hot water heater, but it's called a buffer tank, right? Would you still have a flow center, but you just have like another thing that kind of looks like a water tank?
You'd still have a flow center. The flow center is just managing the flow through the loop outside. And with a water-based or hydronic heat pump, you more often than not would have a buffer tank. That's probably beyond the scope of today, but I'm happy to discuss that with anybody.
Cool.
And then off from the buffer tank can be a host of different distribution systems: baseboard, radiant flooring, air handlers, or all of those.
So lots of options. That's great. Cool. Well, I guess we're going to see Barney next upstairs. Probably misses everybody.
That's right. While Nick is doing that, I'm gonna go upstairs, and first, I guess I'll show you where our stairs lead out, and where they very impressively wheeled the furnace through. There's where our Bilko stairs.
So just a quick comment on the electrical requirements. Becca indicated that we didn't have to make any changes to her electrical panel. She had a 200 amp service there. 200 amp service generally is going to more than handle a heat pump. It's going to be the heat pump is going to, in most cases, be your biggest consumer of electricity. We can, in some cases, do conversions with the panel is only 150 amps, and on rare occasions as low as 100 amps. And if you don't have enough service, then it can be a couple $1,000s or more to upgrade your service to your house. These days, almost all houses are built with constructed with 200 amp service.
Perfect.
But we occasionally run into systems that are the houses that are 50, 100 years old and haven't been updated in a while that may only have 100 or 150 amp service.
Oh, I see Nick on the go. All right, Nick, I will go ahead and pin your screen. Give me just a sec.
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Oh, we're all good.
Nick's phone decided there was a time limit and my computer didn't.
No worries.
So here's our kitchen where Lake Country installed a new vent here. There's an old vent in here too. Their ideal plan was to kind of stick it over here by this window, but again, the
Sorry.
old house thing, there wasn't really a good place to put it. And then they installed this return vent here for us, which again has been heating our kitchen really comfortably. This white grate here is where the old mobile home fuel oil furnace was blasting out heat. And we actually still have the furnace in here, but we've disconnected all of the ducts. But it was, as you saw in the photo earlier in the slides, there was ductwork going here and then up to that chimney space. And we've taken back a lot of space in this room. We're just kind of keeping the old furnace around because we're planning to hopefully sell it. And then the tank is in this closet here. And yeah, those are kind of the biggest changes to the house, other than obviously the basement.
And what are you planning to do when you get that second oil tank out, Becca?
I want to turn this into a laundry area because old house things, we have our laundry in our kitchen, but the washer's on one side of the kitchen and the dryer's on the other side of the kitchen, as you can see here.
I love it. Oh yeah, where was that tight spot that they went through? The
Oh
crawl
yeah,
space.
so the crawl space that you saw down there kind of leads into this area in our kitchen. You can kind of see like from here to here is the entry to our crawl space that the Lake Country guys dropped into. And then it's quite a narrow crawl space underneath our dining room, underneath our kitchen, and then under our mudroom, where they also helped upgrade the ductwork, because the ductwork kind of goes through here. And we had a duct in here already, but the previous furnace just didn't reach past this way. And now it gets heated pretty nicely in the winter. And if you're claustrophobic, it's not it's not a fun crawl space to be in.
Becca, is that space now okay heated?
Yeah, it's pretty nice. This room is not I would basically just say this room is basically not insulated at all. And in the winter it's like a little bit chilly, but like still habitable. But we're not really hanging out in here. It's our mud room, so it serves its purpose. And sometime we'd like to improve the insulation, especially if I'm gonna put a washer out here and don't want the pipes to freeze.
Awesome. That looks great. Do you want me to pull up the pictures for what it looks like outdoors?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the top two pictures are during and shortly after the horizontal loop field was finished being installed. Out past that little outhouse is where the 200 feet by 400 feet area was, where the field is, and then it comes in to our house through that little kind of passageway closer to our house. And then the bottom picture is what that 200 by 400 feet area looked like. It was probably like March once the snow melted.
And one of the things I noticed in this picture that I liked, if you look in the picture to the right, you can actually see was it your old AC unit?
Yeah, and that's not.
I know it's just a pad. It's really cool. Steve, do you have any comments on the outdoor images before we kind of look at what it looks like now?
These are all new to me.
Nice. And you said there's two excavators, right? There was it wasn't just the big one?
Yes. In cases like Becca's Nicks, where there's a lot of small trees close to the house that we have to navigate through, our big excavator just isn't appropriate. So we oftentimes rent a tiny excavator to maneuver through that.
Nice.
And that's what that same area looks like now. The ground got a little bit more irregular with time and settling. It's kind of hard to tell with photo, but that very top, very green photo, you can kind of see the ground kind of drops off, and that basically the same exact plants are growing. And so it's kind of like a 2-foot drop, but it's only in this really small area, probably like 2 feet by 6 feet. And then a little bit of the ground is just kind of a little bit lumpy, like with that picture of our dog in it. We could have been aggressive with leveling it and planting seed, but like I said, we're kind of planning on putting doing more stuff with that. And we kind of just didn't want to deal with it with our wedding coming up. And we want to maybe do some other landscaping things that we just haven't parsed out yet.
Yeah, so it grew over pretty well. I think when I went to visit, it still felt like a bit of an oasis. And you said that you can kind of see the pathways where the pipes related. It's kind of like a bit of an E shape, right?
Well, I think underground it looks like an E.
Oh, gotcha.
But on the surface, it just looks like a rectangle.
Cool. But yeah, we have a bunch. We're just about to pause, and we'll have a bunch of Q&A or fill in any other points of interest. But this is one of our many open houses, so we're extremely excited that Becca and Nick and Steve came to share their experience and what was going on with their home for the retrofit. Becca had reached out some time ago to learn about heat pump incentives, and then had met a neighbor who had put one in with Lake Country. So that was a great connection there. Lake Country is one of our contractor partners. So if you're interested in working with them, let us know. But coming up, actually this Wednesday, we have another open house over at the McKinley home in Bath, New York. They have an air source heat pump and heat pump water heater. So a little different a setup. And then later in August, we'll be at the Martins for partial heat pump system. And then again, later in August, we have quite a few in August, a heat pump water installation and a couple in September. So lots of great opportunities coming up if you'd like to check those out. And feel free to connect with us. I'll put some contact information in the chat. But I will go ahead and stop screen sharing so we can open it up the floor for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions for Becca and Nick? I know everyone's odd because it's an amazing tour. I feel super excited that this was able to happen today. Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have questions, or put something in the chat if you prefer. All right. Oh, Christina's super happy with it. Okay, great information. Carl, did you have any questions?
No, just curious,
What kind of heating system do you have currently, Carl?
We have a forced air, oil forced air, but we heat most of the house with probably by now a 40-year-old box wood stove in one part, and that's provides a lot of heat. I don't know how much longer.
I've encountered that scenario numerous times in my time as a geothermal contractor, and some of the reasons that the clients have said they wanted to do geothermal or get rid of wood were pretty interesting. One of which was, hey, I'm retired now and I want to go visit my grandkids in the winter without having somebody to stoke my wood stove. That's one I didn't expect.
I'm gonna go ahead and pop. I know that Lake Country is a good website for maintenance for these systems. So thank you, Becca and Nick, for demoing that. So I'm just gonna pop that in the chat.
So this is Joel Moritz. So I have some questions when you're ready for me.
Please go ahead, Joel.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for putting this on, and the folks opening their homes up for this. That's all pretty cool. Unfortunately, I was traveling and parked at Home Depot in Ithaca now, and was not able to see the video. So I apologize. From the conversation, though, that sounded like that was a coil system versus linear in trenches. Is that correct?
No, the horizontal system was linear.
It was linear. Cool.
As opposed to what we call a slinky.
Yeah.
Which you might be referring to as a coil.
Yes, I am, and I've read some that there's some advantage to going linear than slinky. We can talk about that later. I'll reach out to you through your webpage.
It's mostly a cost advantage. If you have enough space to do linear, that's what we'll do. But if we're tight on space and we can still possibly get it in horizontally without having to go to an expensive vertical, we'll do coils.
Okay, so how long is your loop and what's your spacing between those? Trying to calculate what size I would need.
I'm gonna do this from memory, but I think her circuits or their circuits were 200-foot trenches, so 400-foot circuits, 200-foot trenches, 40-foot circuits. Typically, they're 10 feet on center apart.
Oh, and
thanks.
Joel, we are recording this, so I will make sure in the next week or two to follow up with an email for everyone who registered. So you'll be able to get a copy of the recording and slides. So no worries there. Becca,
Okay.
where are you going to put your dahlia tubes now? You used to store them in the basement, right? Keep it nice and cool.
Yeah, I'll have to keep them in someone who has a colder basement.
That's a neat problem to have. So what was the depth of the trenches?
They are generally 6 to 7 feet deep. I don't have in front of me exactly what Becca's and Nick's were, but
Okay,
we have a design program that we're able to adjust all those parameters: depth, spacing between circuits, and length of circuits.
Okay, cool. So rule of thumb, and I hate rules of thumb, sorry, but deeper the better? Or is there a
in general,
but
but
cost?
Yeah, there comes a point of diminishing returns.
Sure.
And so you start getting below 8 feet and you kind of hit the diminishing returns.
And then
I
Becca,
won't ask you.
Oh, okay, Joel, sorry.
I'm sorry, I want to ask you what the soils are. What's the COP of the system?
Could you explain what COP is, Steve,
Yes,
for people who might tune in later?
So COP stands for coefficient of performance. And with heat pumps, depending on the type of heat pump, it generally ranges from 2.5 to greater than 6. If you multiply that by 100, you've gotten the efficiency as most humans are used to dealing with. By comparison, a high efficiency fossil fuel furnace might be 95%. A heat pump with a COP of 4 is 400%. With the Sycamore that Nick and Becca chose, the COP varies depending on the speed at which it's running, and it runs from anywhere from 100% of capacity, obviously, down to 20%. The sweet spot tends to be in about the 30 to 60% range, which the COP will depend on the temperature of the incoming water from the loop. But in worst case, in the middle of the winter, when it's down in the 30s, the COP is going to be somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5, depending on the speed at which it's operating.
And Becca and Nick, anything else to round out your tour and your experience and all that good stuff?
No, just in the same vein as that, from what I was researching, I think that what's relevant to this conversation is our fuel oil furnace that was, again, from like the mid 90s, I think was like 82% efficiency. I couldn't tell you what the COP was, but
0.82.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
It wasn't 3.
Right, I just multiplied by 100, got it.
Joel, if you have additional questions, feel free to give me a call.
Just one, it's kind of a generic one. And again, hate rules of thumb, but how's the cost breakdown, like maybe on a percentage of the outside work versus the inside work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Roughly, and this is based on a horizontal loop, not a vertical loop. It's going to change significantly. But if it's a horizontal loop, then in a forced air heat pump system, it's roughly 1/3 outside, 2/3 inside.
Cool. That's it for me. Thank you so much. I will reach out to you through webpage or something.
Great. Well, I want to thank Joel, Carl, and I think Christine had to duck off, but thank you everyone so much for coming. Thank you, Steve, for doing the installation with your team and getting in all those tight places and maneuvering everything for this magnificent ground source heat pump system. And again, Becca and Nick and Barney, thank you so much for hosting and having us in your home. And I hope that everyone has a great afternoon. And again, we will be following up, or if you have folks who who want to attend and missed out, we will be following up in the next week or two with a copy of the recording, as well as the PDF slides. Hey, Barney, I'm sorry I can't give you a dog treat from here, but I did give you 2 last time, so hopefully that makes up for it.
Thanks for organizing and hosting this, Erica.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. Well,
All right, thanks
if
again,
there
everyone.
aren't any last minute words, thank you so much and have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.